Hello, I'm Lena Taro, and I'm going to take us through an Ignite-style talk on what do we want our students to learn. I'm a math teacher at Moravian Academy, and my Twitter handle is @mathteacher24. So even though I'm a math teacher, really I'm a teacher who happens to teach math. And yes, there's certain content or math content that I want my students to know. Graphing lines, solving equations, finding probabilities, creating a proof. But they're not going to remember all that stuff once they leave my classroom. What I really want them to be able to do is to be an effective thinker. I want them to ask the right questions. I want them to use their answers to those questions to help them solve problems. I want them to understand the big picture, and I also want them to realize that failure is okay, that failure leads to success. So what I'm going to talk about here is based on the 5 elements of effective thinking by Burger and Starbird. They based their 5 elements on the 5 elements of the ancient Greeks: earth, fire, air, water, and the quintessential element which they thought was what the heavens or what the universe was made of. I'm going to go through each of these 5 elements and give some examples of how you might apply these in your life or in your classroom. Earth. Ground your thinking and understand deeply. In order to become a good violinist, you need to actually have a very good understanding of the basics before you can play virtuoso type pieces. What is the core idea of the subject or problem? What's essential and what's basic? So for example, when I was in graduate school, we had these things called MK1 and MK2, which apparently meant must know, and we had to memorize these proofs. And there was no way I could memorize those proofs if I thought them as a bunch of disconnected ideas. I needed to know what was the core ideas, and by understanding those core ideas, I could understand the proof. Here's an example from a recent Math League contest. When you look at this question, it seems overwhelming, but you have to ask yourself, what's essential? And the essential thing here is the 0 on the end. We're adding 2 numbers together, and the answer is 0. Understanding that concept is needed for that problem. Fire, igniting insights through mistakes and failure to succeed. Just because you get something wrong doesn't mean that you've failed. It means that you've learned a way not to solve the problem. So let errors be your guide. Start with a bad draft. It gives you something to go with. For example, kids learning how to ski or walk. They fall, they figure out what they did wrong, they fix it, they get back up, they try again. We should try to be more like that as adults with our failures. Value mistakes in the classroom. When a student gets something wrong, don't just ignore them or say, well, no, that's not right. Ask yourself, what does the error say about the lesson? And for students, what can students learn from that error? Even our best students can learn from the mistakes of others. Air, creating questions out of thin air, and be your own Socrates. Be an active listener. When people are giving lectures, ask questions. Right now, ask yourself questions relative to what I'm talking about, and think about what you would ask if you could see me in person, and learn to ask better questions. For example, if you know your subject really well, you should be able to write questions about it. Have your students write questions that could be put on the next test. And if they have questions on the homework, don't let your students just leave it blank or just put a question mark beside number 5, and when they say, I have a question on 5, ask them, well, what is your question? They should have an exact question. Water. Seeing the flow of ideas and looking back, forward, realizing that ideas iterate or flow and are related to each other, and that you're never really done with learning. Ideas are interconnected, so when you're teaching a particular course or a particular unit, have the students ask themselves, what might come next? Or how does what we're learning about now, how is that related to what we just learned? Iterate again and again. Did we try that already? Can we see our history? One of the things I wish I could do is have my students do their work in Google Docs where I could see their history, because otherwise they erase their work and I can't see their thinking. Seeing what we've tried before and seeing our history is important. The quintessential element, engaging in change. You just have to make a decision that you're going to try to use these elements of effective thinking and realize that you're never going to stop thinking and learning. Work on becoming your best and realizing that change takes time. So, the quintessential element, here's my challenge for you. Stop the insanity. Is there something that you're doing right now in your classroom or in your personal life that isn't working? Why are you still doing it? Ask yourself questions. Why isn't it working? What could I do differently? What is the core ideas behind this problem? So what do we want our students to learn besides our content? We want them to ask effective questions, to use them to solve problems, to understand the big picture, and realize that failures lead to success.